Next presenter is from the School of Business. It's Dr. Neil Perry, as I see, a PhD from La Trobe. And Neil's presentation this afternoon is called Helping Non-Profits to Ensure Environmental and Social Integrity in Planning and Policy. Thanks very much, Neil.
Thank you. Great. Imagine that you're Noah on Noah's Ark, and you're considering which species to board the Ark. Unlike the biblical story, though, imagine that there's not enough space to actually hold all the species, and you've got to make a decision about which species to board and which are going to be left behind. This is a situation confronting conservation decision makers around the world where there's not enough funds, there's not enough space, there's not enough resources to actually save all the species. So there's got to be choices being made. Economists have had a go at this kind of problem and of course come up with the solution that we've got to look at the costs and benefits of each of these species. The benefits though in economics are human-centred. So what we're going to be doing then is prioritising the species that are charismatic, the species that are large, mammals mostly, the species that are very colourful, and also the bizarre species. In my research, I argue that this is counterproductive and that what we need to do is focus on the species that underpin the foundations and the dynamics of ecosystems. So ecologically important species, keystone species are the ones that we've got to target. Effectively, what I argue is that we should be creating an ecosystem on the Ark rather than a collection of zoo animals. So the problem here is that economics lacks the complexity, lacks the ability to model ecological complexity. And while this example is very stark, the Noah's Ark example, it actually permeates throughout environmental policy, affects all environmental policy. I've made these particular points in 24 articles in The Conversation, which have reached over 90,000 readers. Some of these, are based on looking at the value of the Great Barrier Reef, for example, or criticising policy that uses environmental markets. Some of these get a response from the government. One, for example, 4 days before the state election, I argued that the state government should come out and tell us what their position is on biodiversity policy, and they responded the next day. This type of engagement leads to presentations, which helps to inform the public for Friends of the Earth, Greater Sydney Landcare Network, amongst others. And also I was, on behalf of the Nature Conservation Council and the Total Environment Centre, I organised and wrote a public statement and got signatures from New South Wales scientists to sign that. We presented it to parliamentarians and got responses from a number of them from all sides of Parliament. Mostly though, the impact of my research comes down to giving assistance to non-profit organisations, because what they need to do constantly is respond to what I'd call ill-considered environmental policy. They need to make submissions on this and be able to cut through these arguments and tell us what's really going on there. For example, with Environmental Defenders Office, New South Wales, I helped them respond to the New South Wales biodiversity legislation. Now this particular bit of legislation relies on a market-based approach to solving environmental problems. So it's straight out of the Environmental Economics Handbook, right? So in theory, these types of policies are efficient in theory. But when you come down to practice, that theory doesn't match up to the practice. So the theory assumes that there's a lack of complexity in nature. It assumes that there's perfect markets, perfect information, and no vested interests at all. Once you get rid of those particular assumptions, well, markets aren't necessarily the most efficient approach to solving these environmental problems. In fact, direct controls can be much more efficient. So I helped them respond to that, and they acknowledged my efforts in helping them by acknowledging me in their annual reports for the last 4 years. With the Illawarra Residents for Responsible Mining, I helped them respond to a cost-benefit analysis for a new coal mine extension. And that particular cost-benefit analysis, again, lacked a consideration of the ecological complexity that would be impacted by the mine. The Planning Assessment Commission summarised my submission when they rejected the mine extension, which subsequently led to it being closed. More recently, I've worked with Penrith City Council to look at social values, which have a similar issue, social values of waste management systems. And I'm working with Lock the Gate at the moment for policy that helps transition coal-dominated regions away from coal. So honestly, I can't say that all the research that I do impacts on policy because the government often just doesn't listen to me. I don't know why. But I can say that I help these environmental organisations perform their role. Thank you.
Very good, Neil. A question from the audience and then one from the judging panel. Thanks very much, Nathan.
Thanks, Neil. You didn't get to it on your slide, but can you just speak briefly to the biodiversity offsets payment calculator?
Yeah, that's part of the New South Wales biodiversity legislation that I helped Environmental Defenders Office respond to. So that's a particular, what would you call it, an exchange. It's a way to work out an exchange between one species and another. So in these market-based approaches, in this market-based approach in particular, developers and landowners can remove habitat by buying credits in a market or paying money into a fund, right? So how do they pay money into a fund? How is that payment worked out? It's through this biodiversity offsets payment calculator. So we, got underneath that, looked at it, worked out how it worked, and were able to provide a criticism of that.
And a question from Mark Smith from our panel.
Mark?
Neil, you're obviously in a business school. How do you interact with environmental scientists to give you data so that you can obviously be communicating accurately to the clients?
Yeah, so I work with environmental scientists in a number of areas. So I'm lucky enough to have people like Hawkesbury Institute for the Environment. I've worked with people there. They help me a lot. I do a lot of reading in ecology as well. So yeah, I'm pretty interdisciplinary in my research. So I don't just concentrate on the economic side of things. And I think that's really important to be able to speak that language, is to do a lot of reading in that particular area. So it helps me a lot.
Okay, please help me in thanking Dr. Neil Perry.
Thank you.